Welcome everyone. It's 1 minute before 11. I'm starting a little early. Usually I like to start right on time, but I invite everybody to look at the chat. Hi, Janet. How are you? There is, if you did not get an email from me or you didn't register before about 10:20 this morning, I sent out a selection of poems that Karen has sent to us that we are going to read during the tour, but I've also put them in the chat as a PDF. So please, if you don't normally look at the chat, look at the chat, download the attachment, and we are going to ask for volunteers to do some reading. And if not, you're going to have to hear me read the whole thing. So, and we need people to join in. But with that being said, now it is 11 o'clock. And good, Janet, glad you got it. Carrie, hello from Aurora, Colorado. Good to see you again. And I know I didn't put where everybody's coming from, but please feel free and go ahead to do it. But we have a lot going on the tour, so we are going to start it. If you did not join our first tour with Karen, Karen's Whitman's walking tour of Brooklyn Heights, it was a lot of fun. And you can find it in our digital archives to take a look at it, because I know you're going to want to. If you did not, and you're going to join us in this tour. So with that being said, I'm just going to turn it over to Karen. Karen, you can introduce yourself. Take it away. I'm going to drop my screen. There we are.
Thank you so much, Justin. And hi, everybody. Happy Pride Month. Happy Pride Weekend, right? I'm so honored and proud and pleased to be with you on the most important weekend of Pride Month. And as many of you know, it is because of what happened 51 years ago on Sunday, June 28th, 1969, when right behind me here at the Stonewall Inn, actually the Stonewall Inn once encompassed both of the buildings behind me, and I'll step out in a second so that you can see it. But in the very early morning hours of June 28th, 1969, a riot here ensued that sparked the LGBTQ plus movement. So I'm standing really at ground zero of the movement. There's a lot of fun stuff going on behind me, and I'm going to bring you there in a second. I just want to introduce the tour because the tour is a little unusual. Okay, so we are looking at Whitman's Queer New York, Stonewall Inn to Pfaff's. And so the tour begins and ends with landmark gay bars, right? This one, probably most of you know just because of its significance today. But the one we're ending with, Pfaff's Cellar, was just as significant in the 19th century. It was really the birthplace of American bohemia. And Whitman was a very important figure in that group. He probably met his first boyfriend, Fred Vaughan, there. He wrote the poems that we are going to read, probably a great majority of those poems in that cellar bar, and also parts of the Calamus poems, which you might know even better because those were published in the 1860 edition of Leaves of Grass. Lots of people know Whitman as America's poet, the godfather of literary Brooklyn, the father of free verse, the bard of democracy, but he is also our first openly gay poet and active spokesperson. And the poems that we're going to read today, called Live Oak with Moss, constitute his first statement about the way that he felt about men. They are a very brave and forthright identification of the love that he felt for men. Walt never published this collection. He kept it in a little notebook, 12 little poems in a handmade notebook. And eventually he ripped the notebook up, edited down the poems, put some of them into the very famous homoerotic Calamus cluster in the 1860 edition of Leaves of Grass. But this cluster, the Live Oak with Moss cluster, he never published as he wrote them down in his notebook. Probably because they are so personal, they're incredibly loving. In these poems, he envisions the LGBTQ plus movement. He envisions a community of same-sex lovers. He imagines a supportive group, and almost imagines a life where everybody is equal. It's just absolutely beautiful and moving. So my idea for this tour, which I've done before, is kind of like it's 12 stages of the cross, except it's the 12 stages of Live Oak with Moss. So there are 12 poems, and they're all beautiful, all really different, not necessarily a sequence, but they all contribute to this vision of Whitman as this outspoken exemplar of equality, of sex, race, everything. And I'm hoping the 12 stops that we're going to make on the tour will be complemented by our reading of those 12 poems. So Justin, you're so sweet. You volunteered to read the first poem, which I think would be really great to start here. But I do want to open it up to the audience to read the poems that are following. And as Justin is reading, I'm going to get active with moving the screen around, and the viewers can more enjoy this beautiful space that I'm in. Once again, I'm on Christopher Street here. I'm in what is called the Sheridan Square area of New York, which encompasses Christopher Park, Stonewall, the Sheridan Monument in the garden here, and it is a national monument. So I'm going to pan around, and you'll enjoy the beautiful rainbow flags as Justin eloquently reads Live Oak with Moss 1. Take it away.
Thank you, Karen. Not the heat flames up and consumes, not the sea waves hurry in and out, not the air delicious and dry, the air of the ripe summer bears lightly along white down balls of myriads of seeds, wafting, sailing gracefully to drop where they may. Not these, oh, none of these, more than the flames of me, consuming, burning for his love, whom I love. Oh, none more than I, hurrying in and out. Does the tide hurry, seeking something or never give up? Oh, I the same, to seek my lifelong lover. Or nor down balls, nor perfumes, nor the high rain emitting clouds are born through the open air, more than my copious soul is born through the open air, wafting in all directions for friendship, for love.
Bravo. Beautiful reading, Justin. And can I ask you, because I know you are a very cultured person, what did you get out of that poem?
I sort of, from it, and actually I've never read this before, this Whitman, and I am also a fan of Whitman. There is this sort of gratitude for nature and sort of how nature kind of manifests the idea of love and appreciation of his lover, is what I got from it. Sort of the idea of the perfumes of the trees and the tides, and that idea of fire and heat. I really got the sense that there was nature and his love for his love were synonymous.
I love it. A+.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
It is an extraordinary poem because what he's really trying to do is legitimize same-sex passion, right? He's constantly evoking these natural images. And of course, at that time, any sort of expression of same-sex love was seen as unnatural. So just by using and reusing, because the cluster uses and reuses images of fire and water and air and earth, you will see those images again and again. He's trying to kind of like ingrain into our minds that idea of the organic naturalness of all types of love. So the poems that we're reading are newly edited by me in a book that is illustrated by Brian Selznick, who some of you might know as the children's book author and illustrator of The Invention of Hugo Cabret. But Brian and I teamed up to kind of bring these poems to light in new ways. And there is an illustrated edition of these poems that's currently available. And what Brian did in these illustrations, which are really more images than illustrations, there's a series of images that you go through as you read the poems. He's evoking also those natural elements, right? So you get fire and air and water and earth, just as reminders of this beautiful love that Whitman is talking about. So thank you for that. And hopefully we'll get someone else to read number 2 soon. And for number 2, I'm going to bring you all to number 2 stop. If you have the handout, the poetry handout, you can follow along, because I've actually made both the poems and images of Whitman, right? The images that you see of Whitman in front of each poem on that handout go chronologically through his life. So we're seeing Walt as sort of like a young Studley flaneur first, and then this next one, you see him at his prime. He's just absolutely gorgeous. That's a Gabriel Harrison photo of him, and he looks transcendent, right? His friend, the naturalist John Burroughs, said that that was the moment the carpenter became a singer, because he just looks so transcendent, his eyes. And underneath that, you have Live Oak with Moss 2, which I would love for someone to read as we look at the site of the Mattachine Society. So this area is rife with LGBTQ plus important sites, and the Mattachine Society was probably the very first gay society. It was actually founded in Los Angeles in 1950, so it's not a New York specific site. But this building, and you're looking at the building that now houses the bar, the Kettle of Fish, I think it was on the parlor floor that the Mattachine, the last offices of the Mattachine Society were in the 1970s. So I remember giving this tour and having people be very moved that remember those early moments of fighting for LGBTQ rights, right? And the integral part that the Mattachine Society played. So with that in mind, and I'm again going to try to pan around the camera so you can enjoy this lovely neighborhood. Would anyone like to volunteer to read Live Oak with Moss 2?
If you'd like to volunteer, you can raise your hand, or you can let me know in the chat. I will unmute you. You don't have to turn your camera on if you don't want to, totally fine, but I'm monitoring. You can raise hand or let me know in the chat if you would like to read. And please don't be shy. I did it. Anyone? Let's see. Tristan, thank you very much. So Tristan, excuse me, I will unmute you and go for it. Thank you. You should be good, Tristan. Oh, maybe not. Hold on, Tristan. It might be a setting I have to do. It is, sorry, hold on. Okay, Tristan, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I saw in Louisiana a live oak growing. All alone stood it, and the moss hung down from the branches. Without any companion, it grew there, glistening out with joyous leaves of dark green. And its look, rude, unbending, lusty, made me think of myself. But I wondered how it could utter joyous leaves, standing alone there without its friend, its lover. For I knew I could not. And I plucked a twig with a certain number of leaves upon it, entwined around a little moss, and brought it away. And I have placed it in the site in my room. It is not needed to remind me as of my friends, for I believe lately I think of little else than of them. Yet it reminds me of a curious token. I write these pieces and name them after it. For all that, and through the live oak glistens there in Louisiana, solidarity is a widened flat space, uttering joyous leaves all its life, without a friend, a lover near. I know very well I could not.
Tristan, that was an amazing reading. Beautiful. You read it right from the heart, and I feel like you of all people, because I know you know what that poem is about. Would you want to say a few words about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the poems that is read that Whitman speaks in the play I'm writing, and it's this thing of where I feel like he was a man of solitude, yet he was always consumed by humans around him, and yet he was craving this undeniable intimacy, and he finds himself struck by the image of this lone oak tree, and I think it's the first time he realizes how alone he feels, and that he takes this memento, not to think of his friends, but as a way to that maybe he can fight the melancholy and all the things he's always felt, to remember that he can be joyous without a lover, even though he knows deep down inside he can't. But there's always this drive to find something more.
Excellent. It's such a beautiful reading. And Tristan is actually tuning in from a place that you could see live oak trees. Live oak with moss is, of course, named after this gorgeous, big southern tree that we don't see up north. We think that Whitman probably saw them when he went down to New Orleans in 1848 to just escape New York. He had been fired from the Brooklyn Daily Eagle for his radical politics, brought his best friend and brother, Thomas Jefferson Whitman, with him. And we think Whitman may have had his first gay lover down there. We don't know. That's sort of urban legend, but something clearly happened to him, because he uses the title of this poem, Live Oak with Moss, and the title of the collection to designate his most homoerotic, most deeply felt poetry. And Tristan knows how they look. Maybe some of you do too. They grow horizontally, right? The branches kind of really spread out wide. So they are necessarily very solitary trees. And so in this poem, you see Whitman contemplating the difference between a private poetic life and a public-facing kind of demonstrative position that he was maybe thinking about having when he wrote Leaves of Grass. So these poems really show him wrestling with that idea of either kind of just having fun, right? Just really enjoying the company of other men, indulging in a very rich private life, or keeping everything sort of public facing. And in this poem, you see him really wrestling between those two choices. Live oak with moss, a lot of people wonder about that symbol. There's a passage in Song of Myself where he writes about it in a way that you think that it maybe is supposed to represent male genitalia. The moss, the Spanish moss that usually hangs from these live oak trees, he's talking about twisting that around a little branch, right, as a symbol. So thank you, Tristan, for illuminating that poem. And while he was doing that, I was walking you all around this beautiful neighborhood, and I'm right now in Christopher Park. And I'm just going to give you another good look at that. Through those flags, you can see a monument. And I've been talking about monuments a lot lately. I guess all of us have. That is General Sheridan, who actually helped with the surrender of Robert E. Lee at Appomattox during the Civil War. So, you know, one of the good guys. And Sheridan Square is named after him, so he sort of presides over this. All these lovely pride flags waving for us around here, and I'm going to swing around, and in Christopher Park, you have George Siegel's gay liberation sculpture. Now, if you look at it, they look almost like they're made out of paper mache, but they're actually metal. And they're catching people in action as if they're planning some sort of movement or maybe another riot, right? There's a lesbian couple on the bench and a gay couple here kind of confiding in one another. And it's it creates such a warm conversational mood, right? Like people talking, planning, actively thinking about their lives, that this is another great place for a Whitman poem. So I'm wondering if someone else would like to try and read Live Oak with Moss 3. And just to entice you with that, Live Oak with Moss 3 is often seen as one of the most beautiful love poems in the English language. So Anybody in the mood for some love?
Janet, would you like to take number 3? Because you volunteered before. If so, unmute yourself and go for it.
Mute. All right, I'm going in there. Hold on. Number 3.
We hear you, so that's good.
Okay. When I heard at the close of the day how I had been praised in the capital, still it was not a happy night for me that followed. And else, when I caroused or when my plans were accomplished, it was well enough. Still I was not happy. But the day when I rose at dawn from the bed of perfect health, electric, inhaling sweet breath, when I saw the full moon in the west grow pale and disappear in the morning light, when I wandered alone over the beach and undressing, bathed, laughing with waters and saw the sun rise, and when I thought how my friend, my lover was coming, then I was happy. Oh, then each breath tasted sweeter, and all that day my food nourished me more, and the beautiful day passed well. And the next came with equal joy, and with the next at evening came my friend. And that night, oh you happy waters, I heard you beating the shores, but my heart beat happier than you, for he I loved was returned and sleeping by my side. And that night in the stillness, his face was inclined toward me, while the moon's clear beams shone, and his arm lay lightly over my breast, and that night I was happy.
Oh my goodness, what a beautiful reading. Thank you so much. Again, another reading straight from the heart. And what is your name again, please?
Is Janet?
Janet, did you get a feeling for the meaning of this poem? Did anything stand out to you?
Well, actually, it made me want to just cry. It was so touching. Oh my God, just to express that feeling, emotion that he had for his lover and how it makes him feel. You know, the moonlight, the beach, the everything. So obviously, you know, reading that poem just triggers something emotionally. It was just beautiful. I just, you know, the happiness that he felt. And I think that's what we all look for. So that's what I got from the poem.
Beautiful. And really that is enough, right? To just love these poems. There doesn't need to be much of a interpretation given by anyone, but just to add to what Janet is telling you, Whitman is writing these poems at a time before the word homosexual was actually invented in America, right? It was first used in Germany in the 1860s, and Whitman is writing these probably mostly during the mid to late 1850s, really wrestling with how he feels, trying to figure it out. But in this poem, it becomes very clear what makes him happy. He's kind of defying the writer's code of not repeating a word, right? You hear the word happy a lot in this poem, but he is searching for it, right? And in the beginning of the poem, you hear the words, you know, he found success in the Capitol, right? He was well received in Washington, but that did not make him happy. What made him happy? It was just simply being with his lover, and he's very specific about that pronoun in this poem. Many of Whitman's other poems kind of dance around with the pronouns. So it could be she, it could be he. He liked to keep it open, right? He was really kind of had an open image of love. But these Live Oak with Moss poems are definitely gay, right? He keeps on aiming for that he that is in the person that is in his life. So thank you so much, Janet, for bringing that one, one of my favorite Whitman poems really to life. And I've been walking, thank you again, yes. And I've been walking down Christopher Street while talking to you because I wanted to show you all an often overlooked little tablet here at the base of a flagpole. So I'm not sure how well you can see it. I'll just read the inscription to you. This flagstaff, raised in memory of the valorous young patriot, Ephraim Elmer Ellsworth, born 1837, died 1861, and his fire zouaves, whose members enlisted in 1861 for military service in the war between the states. Colonel Ellsworth was the first man of his rank killed. And there's a little note on the bottom. It looks like this was put up by the state of New York and the city of New York in 1936. So I guess Ellsworth at first got this plaque because he was the first man killed in action in the Civil War. And the Civil War, of course, ties in a very big way for Walt Whitman, who volunteered his services as a nurse and a caretaker and a letter writer from 1862 to 1865 and even beyond that. Why this also is kind of a neat thing to see and consider as we do this tour, walking tour of Whitman's Queer New York, is that this young man, who was very handsome, by the way, you can look him up, very dashing, and with that suave, sort of Turkish-inspired outfit, really stood out. He was killed because he was removing a Confederate flag that was flying that could be seen from Abraham Lincoln's bedroom. Okay, so nowadays we think that maybe there was a great deal of fondness between Lincoln and Ellsworth. This may have been a lover relationship. It might have been just a really deep friendship, but Lincoln cared very, very deeply for him. And the fact that the young man fell to his death in the service of Lincoln for what Lincoln could see from his bedroom just seems really significant. So striking to me is that this plaque, as nice as it is, gets his name wrong. His name is actually Elmer Ephraim Ellsworth. So they got that wrong, but they did get the dates right. And in honor of Ellsworth and all the other young men and some women who died in the service of the Civil War, can I have someone read Live Oak with Moss 4?
Yes, we had a volunteer already. So Wally, if you would like to go ahead and unmute and go for it. Thank you.
This moment, as I sit alone, yearning and pensive, it seems to me there are other men in other lands, yearning and pensive. It seems to me I can look over and behold them in Germany, France, Spain, or far away in China or in Russia, talking other dialects. And it seems to me, if I could know those men better, I should love them as I love men in my own lands. It seems to me they are as wise, beautiful, benevolent as any in my own lands. Oh, I know we should be brethren. I know I should be happy with them.
Wally, that is a beautiful reading. Oh my goodness, this tour is more exciting for me for the readings than what I am saying. Thank you for putting such passion and thought into it. Do you have a few words about the poem? Anything that it evoked, something of note that it called forth for you?
Yes, so we tend to think of Whitman as being associated with America, but here he's talking about an international community of gay men. And as somebody who was born outside the US, somebody who's lived a big chunk of his life outside of the US, this really spoke to me. And I remember going back to New York for and I just felt like, that sense of a global community of gay men, of an LGBT community was really realized and has been realized.
All right, Wally, I have not heard a word that you said. Well, I actually heard the first part of it, but Whitman's beloved firemen were flying by in a massive truck just there. Sorry, but I heard you say something about we tend to think of Whitman as America's poet, and yet here he's really reaching out to other lands, right? He's envisioning a community of lovers that goes well beyond America. And that's really striking. It's a global movement for Whitman, right? It's not just like a New York City thing. It's not just like a neighborhood thing. He is thinking about a revolution. And remember, this is a good 100 years before the movement actually starts. So it situates Whitman as the earliest open spokesperson of gay rights, worldwide gay rights. Guys, there is a lot of noise, so I'm going to show you Julius's bar, and then I'm going to kind of walk away from it. I guess now that coronavirus is, at the point where we can go back to construction, New York City has fully embraced that idea. Take a look at this beautiful sand here, actually. Yellow, yellow sand. They're doing something very big over here on 10th Street. But I wanted to give you a shot of Julius's bar before I walk away, and a reminder to go back on your own for the hamburgers and for the history. Julius has been around, I think, since the 1950s, but there's been a bar at that location since the 19th century. So you can kind of imagine Whitman walking down Waverly here, just enjoying many of the same buildings. Just even this one that I'm looking at here has a plaque 1839, so Whitman would have seen that. And perhaps grabbing his favorite beefsteak meal or oysters, another thing that he really enjoyed at Pfaff's, and the lager that the Germans had just brought over that was so different from the stouts and ales that New Yorkers were used to drinking. So Julius's is most famous because in 1966, they had something called a SIP-in, S-I-P, which was influenced, of course, by the civil rights movement and the idea of a sit-in. And the bartender who normally refused to serve gay men was confronted with that, right? And actually, people openly declared their sexuality and demanded service. So Julius's is now just like a lovely open place to go to, but with a lot of history connected to the LGBTQ plus movement. And I wanted to read number 5 in front of Julius's, but as we walk towards Northern Dispensary, I'm wondering if anybody would like to read Live Oak with Moss number 5.
Matthew Kingsley volunteered. Would you like to read number 5, Matthew?
Sure. I did find that unmute. Can you hear me?
You're a little low. If you can turn up the volume or get a little closer.
How about now?
Try again.
Now?
Still a little low, but I think as long as it's quiet and
This is
go for
Yeah,
it.
as long as we don't have any more fire trucks zooming by, we're all right.
Actually, you know what I'm going to do, Karen, if you don't mind, while Matthew is reading, I'm going to mute you just in case we get some ambient noise.
Great.
And then I'll unmute you immediately. Okay?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Perfect.
No problem. All right, go ahead, Matthew.
long I thought that knowledge alone would suffice me. Oh, if I could but obtain knowledge. Then my lands engrossed me. For them I would live. I would be their orator. Then I met the examples of old and new heroes. I heard the examples of warriors, sailors, and all dauntless persons. And it seemed to me I too had it in me to be as dauntless as any, and would be so. And then to finish all, it came to me to strike up the songs of the new world. And then I believed my life must be spent in singing. But now to take notice, land of the prairies, land of the South Savannas, Ohio's land. Take notice, you Canock Woods, and you, Lake Huron, and all that with you roll toward Niagara, and you, Niagara, also, and you, Californian mountains, that you all find someone else, that he be your singer of songs. For I can be your singer of songs no longer. I have passed ahead. I have ceased to enjoy them. I have found him who loves me, as I him, in perfect love. The rest I dispense. I sever from all that I thought would suffice me, for it does not. It is now empty and tasteless to me. I heed knowledge and the grandeur of the states and the examples of heroes no more. I am indifferent to my own songs. I am to go with him I love, and he is to go with me. It is to be enough for each of us that we are together. We never separate again.
Going to unmute myself. Absolutely, another outstanding reading. And your name again, please?
Matthew?
Matthew, did you know that poem before you read it?
I did not.
Okay, you had me guessing there. Do you have any wisdom just from reading it that one time?
It to me, it was like a wedding vow. Something that you would, I could see him, like, when it was his turn at a wedding, that's what he would say.
What a gorgeous thing to say. Yeah, it's you could definitely recite this at a place where you would be committing yourself to someone else, because this is a poem about leaving the world of literature behind, right? Whitman starts by saying, oh yeah, I had in mind to be America's poet, the poet of democracy, and so forth. But guess what? I have met someone that does much more for me than anything that I could do with my writing. So it's one of those rare poems that you read. I'm reminded also of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Ode to Dejection, that is about not writing poetry anymore, right? A brilliant poem about not being a poet. And of course, Whitman doesn't heed his own advice and winds up writing again. But at this very moment, there's such joy and commitment in the poem. It's something to hold on to. So thank you so much, Matthew, for bringing that one to life so beautifully and thinking about a wedding bell. Actually, that's a really great image to call forth on this tour, because it was exactly 5 years ago. I don't know if you can see Stonewall through the trees there. I'm looking down Christopher Street where I just walked. Exactly 5 years ago that gay marriages became legal in all 50 states, right? And I think it was just a few days later when Andrew Cuomo, the governor, performed his first same-sex marriage ceremony in front of Stonewall. He had just gotten this, the certificate or whatever you need in order to do that sort of service, but that happened right here. And then the next year, I think Stonewall became a national landmark. So the first explicitly gay, something for LGBTQ national landmark. So thank you so much. There is a site, if I'm looking back down towards Julius is on Waverly there, and if you would keep walking down and hit 7th Avenue and make a right, you would eventually hit the New York City AIDS Memorial. And Justin, can I ask you to show those images for folks so that they can see what it looks like?
Yes, you can. I'm queuing it up.
Thanks.
No problem.
So it's a hike, guys, and that's why oh,
nope. Sorry.
gosh,
That was
actually
my looking for Elmer. There we go. I sent everybody a picture of Elmer while you were talking about him.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, no
Isn't
problem.
he handsome?
He is very handsome. Yeah, no, he's pretty good looking. I'm not gonna lie. All right, so here we are, AIDS Memorial. Go for it, Karen.
Okay, so just a few words about this gorgeous memorial. It was, I think, commemorated in 2017, and you're probably shaking your head thinking, 2017, AIDS? And it's true, it was a long, long time coming. A lot of planning, a lot of hemming and hawing and decision making, and the results are the monument that you see here at the St. Vincent's Triangle. For you New Yorkers, you will remember that St. Vincent's Hospital used to be right there, just recently turned to very lavish condos. But in that triangle, part of the deal, I guess, for the developer was to make this into a memorial and park. So yeah, that's me and Walt in St. Vincent's Triangle at the AIDS Memorial. And it's basically kind of an interlocking series of triangles. Of course, that's very important, right? I keep thinking how triangles are a symbol, right? An early symbol of the gay rights movement. It's the shape of Christopher Park, and also very much a part of this monument. And Justin is showing you a few photos that I've taken. You can stay at this one for a second, Justin. So what they decided to do is they put a one of those fountains, the endless fountain in the center. It's a circular fountain, and coming out from that fountain are words. As you can see, these are excerpts from Whitman's poem "Song of Myself." And it was a commission that resulted in the artist Jenny Holzer working on this. And what she did is she selected quotations from Song of Myself. It's not the entire long poem, but it's a good chunk of it. And she carved them into granite blocks that are again on the floor, coming out in concentric circles from that fountain in the middle. And what you're looking at on this screen is one of the endpoints of it. And these are the very last words of Song of Myself that are so many people find touching. Failing to fetch me at first, keep encouraged. Missing me one place, search another. I stop somewhere waiting for you. And famously, Whitman ends that not with a period, as if he is actually always waiting for us. So I was talking to my students about this monument recently, and yeah, you can put me back on actually, Justin, because I'm gonna ask someone to do a reading, and I'm gonna put myself on here for a change. And there's a little bit of a controversy, right, with this memorial, because it doesn't mention AIDS. It doesn't mention the survivors. It doesn't mention the casualties. There are no names whatsoever on the monument. It's just Whitman's poem. So if you don't know that Whitman was gay, you might wonder what that's doing there. I've heard Jenny Holzer talk about the monument, and she says that the poem is so open and so welcoming. I mean, that's what she wanted to happen at this particular memorial. But it's something to think about, right? Just it's a really interesting memorial because it doesn't actually commemorate names. Thinking about that memorial and its placement brings us to Live Oak with Moss again. And I think, are we up to number 5, guys? Are you keeping track?
6.
6. Okay. Does anybody feel like reading number 6?
Any takers for 6? You can raise your hand, or you could tell me in the chat. You could also just unmute and go for it if you'd like. Anyone?
Do we have a reader, Justin?
So Tristan agreed to do it again. So why don't, Tristan, why don't you go ahead, unmute yourself?
Awesome. Thank you, Tristan.
Thanks, Tristan.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Okay. Number 6. What think you I have taken my pen to record? Not the battleship, perfect modeled, majestic, that I saw today arrive in the offing, under full sail, nor the splendor of the past day, nor the splendors of the night that envelops me, nor the glory and growth of the city spread around me. But the 2 men I saw today on the pier, the parting of dear friends, the one to remain hung on the other's neck and passionately kissed him, while the one departed tightly pressed to the one to remain in his arm.
Oh my goodness. I think I need a cigarette, Tristan. Thank you. What an awesome reading. You brought exactly the passion that we need in that poem. And any words?
I mean, I think he's really starting to put into words what he's been wanting his whole life. I mean, we talk about him singing the songs of America, but he has never once actually sung his own song. I mean, I guess you could arguably say Leaves of Grass was that, but I don't know that he was 100% completely honest the way he is with these poems. And I think that's why he's saying, can you find someone else to be the singer of your songs in 5? And in 6, you just see him, out of all the things, this perfect, beautiful ship with these mighty, sails coming in, or the day, or the city growing. None of that impresses him. That's not what he wants to write about. It's that this small moment of intimacy of 2 men, of the undeniable need to just stay connected and not to leave, that he wants an unfading love. And yeah.
Extraordinary, and thank you so much. You are spot on with Whitman. And this idea that, you know, he's seeing a lot of things around him that are totally newsworthy, right? And poetry traditionally takes these tremendous subjects on, war, tragedy, and so forth. But what does Whitman really want to write about? The two guys who are really passionate, just sitting next to each other. You know, it's just a simple everyday scene. He is the poet of the everyday, but he's the poet of the everyday that was ignored. And you see this very clearly in this poem. So thank you so much, Tristan. I've been sort of backtracking and doubling my path here to just make sure that I come back to Northern Dispensary, which is, oh, got the fire truck again. I see the fireman. That's another poem from Song of Myself, with breastbone broken. But I'm walking along I'm on Waverly, and I'm just about to hit the intersection of Waverly and Waverly. It's one of the few places in New York City where you have a juncture of streets with the same name. And I've always been very curious about this building. This is the Northern Dispensary. Just give you guys a shot here. It's a 3-story building. Although if you look really closely between the second and third stories, you can see that the brick shifts slightly. So this was originally built in 1831 as a 2-story building, and then they added another story later. There's a plaque in front of the door, or above the door, that says Northern Dispensary Institute 1827, built 1831. So the Northern Dispensary was a concept, right, that existed before this building was built. In 1827, a free clinic was founded called the Northern Dispensary. And you're wondering why Northern? Well, I'm in the northern part of Manhattan, if you're talking about 1831, right? The city didn't go that much further north. And this was a free clinic. It was a free medical clinic that you could walk in and get free service for more than 100 years, actually. There were very many famous people that came here, including Edgar Allan Poe, who came for medication in 1836. If you know anything about Poe, he was a real serious alcoholic, and probably dabbled in other things. So I'm not surprised that he came down to the free clinic. Whitman met Poe once. Poe was a sometime newspaper editor, and he was editing a journal called the Broadway Journal, and Walt was looking for work. This was in the 1840s. And Whitman writes about this in Specimen Days. He walks in and he sees Edgar Allan Poe, right? The incredible opposite of Whitman in every way, right? Sort of the dark spirit as opposed to Whitman's radiance. And Walt's like, seemed like a nice guy. A little jaded maybe, which winds up being the understatement of the century. So back to Northern Dispensary. So Poe walked in these doors, many other people. And then in the 1980s, there was a young man named George Whitmore who had AIDS, who came here for service. He wanted dental work done, and they refused service to him. So he sued the Northern Dispensary and won, I'm thinking $47,000, something like that. But in any case, he won enough to put the dispensary out of business. So the building went up for sale. The Archdiocese, the Catholic Archdiocese of New York bought it for a while. They thought about turning it into an AIDS clinic. The neighborhood apparently resisted that, if you can believe it. This was again the 1980s. And the building has now fallen into the hands of a very unusual real estate maven named Gottlieb. I think his name, what is his first name? Bill or William Gottlieb. So Gottlieb is very famous. I'm not sure he's still alive. I think his son has now taken over the real estate business. But he is famous for taking over landmark historic buildings and doing something called warehousing them, which means that you just don't do anything with them, right? You just let them stand. And if you look at this building, and if you've ever lived down here or walked regularly past this, you and me have been very curious about why there is nothing going on in this incredibly valuable piece of real estate, right? It's a triangle all to itself, a triangular block here. I remember, because I was part of the Stonewall 50 consortium, that we were thinking about for a while projecting images on the side of Northern Dispensary as part of the celebration. That didn't happen, but it's such a weird and kind of wonderful building here. I just hope that it stays up, right? Because it does belong to a real estate company. So the building has gone from Whitman's time to our own with very little change. And let us bring back then these timeless poems, Live Oak with Moss. And I think we are up to number 7. I would love to get another volunteer to read that poem right here at this timeless site.
We are at number 7, a volunteer to read number 7. Oh, we got a hand raised. Daniel, go for it. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. You bards of ages hence, when you refer to me, mind not so much my poems, nor speak of me that I prophesize of the states, and led them the way of their glories. But come, I will inform you who I was underneath that impassive exterior. I will tell you what to say of me. Publish my name and hang up my picture as that of the tenderest lover, the friend, the lover's portrait, of whom his friend, his lover, was fondest, who was not proud of his songs, but of the measureless ocean of love within him, and freely poured it forth, who often walked lonesome walks thinking of his dearest friends, his lovers, who, pensive away from the one he loved, often lay sleepless and dissatisfied at night, who, dreading the lest one he loved might after all be indifferent to him, felt the sick feeling, oh sick, sick, whose happiest days were those, far away through the fields, in woods, on hills, he and another, wandering hand in hand, they twain, apart from other men. Whoever, as he sauntered on the streets, curved with his arm the manly shoulder of his friend, while the curving arm of his friend rested upon him also.
Daniel, thank you so much. Such a moving final image, right? With the curving arms around the 2 men. Did anything stick out for you in this poem?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that he also wants to be seen as like one of the great American poets, and someone who's led America to their glories, although he says, forget me for those things. But I just think it's interesting that he saw himself in that light in the future. But yeah, it's interesting that he talks about like that feeling of I guess, abandonment or rejection, but doesn't talk about the separation at all. It's just that he's just trying to express his, as he says, his measureless ocean of love that he has for someone. It's just nice.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. I also really love that moment where, you know, he's kind of talking about the different ways that he might be remembered, but then he's like, talk about me as the tenderest lover. Right? Like that's the way that he wants to be remembered. And I guess in that you can really see the intimacy of these poems. This is not a poem about a poet who is trying to be America's poet, right? This is a poem about someone who wants a serious private life and to be recognized as a great lover. So we only have actually one record of possibly someone who had sex with Whitman. I don't even know if I've told my students this story, but there was one person, and now I'm gonna forget, oh gosh. It's in a book called The Circle of Sex, which is sort of a notorious book about like early homoerotic circles, many of which were kind of Whitman disciples. And apparently one of the participants talked about being intimate with Whitman and being massaged by Whitman and massaging Whitman also. So that's a particularly hot passage that I don't have in front of me, but you can always email me, everyone, if you want to find out where that passage is. Thank you so much, Daniel. And while you were reading, I was walking down Waverly. I'm kind of walking east on Waverly towards Washington Square Park, and I'm now at Gay Street. Isn't it so nice that there's actually a gay street in this neighborhood? Now, I'm very sad to inform you that it probably doesn't have much to do with being gay. There's a record of someone named R. Gay that lived here and had a stable in this area. I really like that he was R. Gay. Right? And so maybe just like a lot of streets in New York, it got named after somebody. But it still is just like such a fun thing that Gay Street is here. And Whitman actually used the word gay in surprising ways, especially in his notebooks. So during the time that he's writing Live Oak with Moss, he's keeping these little journals, often handmade, and a lot of them have lists and lists of descriptions of men. Their names, their ages, their look. And after some of the descriptions, Whitman writes gay. Now, probably he meant just like jolly or reckless, but as you know, the word kind of turned from what it meant, just sort of broadly speaking, happy, to homosexual, probably sometime in the early 20th century. So maybe there were just early signs of that Whitman was tuning into. I'm really happy to be focused for a while on the scene on Gay Street here, which, by the way, because it's been such a neat little tucked in street, has been home to quite a bit of fun activities like speakeasies and all sorts of sort of underground concerts. And while we are here, we are up to Live Oak with Moss 8. Is there someone who would like to read that beautiful poem?
It's going to Tristan again. He said it's his favorite. So Tristan.
And go for it.
Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll give you this anecdote before I read it, that Karen has always said this poem has meant so much to her and her students, and it's my favorite one out of all of this. So
Mine too, Tristan. So I'm with you on that.
Hours continuing, long, sore, and heavy-hearted. Hours of the dusk when I withdraw to a lonesome and unfrequented spot, seating myself, leaning my face into my hands. Hours sleepless, deep in the night, when I go forth speeding swiftly the country roads or through the city streets, or pacing miles and miles of stifling plaintive cries. Hours discouraged, distracted. For he, the one I cannot content myself without, soon I saw him content himself without me. Hours when I am forgotten. Oh, weeks and months are passing, but I believe I am never to forget. Sullen and suffering hours. I am ashamed, but it is useless. I am what I am. Hours of my torment. I wonder if other men ever have the like out of the like feelings. Is there even one other like me, distracted, his friend, his lover lost to him? Is he too, as I am now? Does he still rise in the morning dejected, thinking who is lost to him, and at night awaking thinking who is lost? Does he too harbor his friendship silent and endless, harboring his anguish and passion? Does some stray reminder or the casual mention of a name bring the fit back upon him? Does he see himself reflected in me? In these hours, does he see the face of his hours reflected?
Wow, thank you so much, Tristan. Another reading right from the heart, and I know that you know this poem quite well. I've read it so many times, and yet I was thinking to myself, I have never heard it on the street like I just heard it now. And it just is chilling to hear Walt Whitman and to hear this particularly moving poem right here on Waverly, crossing over 6th Avenue. So do you want to give your take on it?
Sure. I mean, I think that, there's the repetition of the word hours. So it also, I mean, you told me this once when I listened to you speak.
Okay, you could repeat.
That it's not just ours, it's ours as like the couple.
Right.
And that I think this is the poem when he realizes that I think he's been putting up this fight. Like there always seems to be a battle with Whitman of the masculine and the feminine. And I think that he realizes that he can be both, and that I am ashamed, but it is useless. I am what I am. And he realizes that I think that the greatest love and the greatest intimacy he's ever had comes from a man. And when that goes away in this time when he's in Louisiana, that it wrecks him, and he doesn't feel encouraged to move on for the future, or just comfortable in the present moment.
Yeah, there is a, thank you for that reading. Very eloquently done. There's a sorrow in this piece. He's obviously very upset about someone who has left him, but there's also this resolution, right? When he says, I am what I am. Even though he's kind of shaken by that realization, it is a realization nonetheless. And I always tell my students that that is the moment he comes out, right? Of all poems, gay Walt Whitman comes out in Live Oak with Moss 8, right in the middle of the poem. It's at a point where if this were a sonnet, we would call it a volta, right? Because sonnets usually have this turn somewhere in the middle. And it seems like Whitman was probably thinking about sonnets, explicitly Shakespeare's sonnets, that also reference homoerotic love. If you remember the mysterious male figure that appears in many of them. And Whitman read them and really loved those pieces and often remarked on them. I'm struck by this piece being 12 lines, because if it were a sonnet, it would be 14. And I like to think that the missing 2 lines at the end are a reminder of the missing couple, right? The missing couplet is kind of a symbol of the missing couple that this poem is really about. So thank you, Tristan, for illuminating that just absolutely moving confessional poem. The story of this poem is really interesting. Whitman published it in a changed form in the 1860s, the 3rd edition of Leaves of Grass, but from that point forward, left it out of his books. And I think it's just because that this is such an intimate expression of self, right? This is different from a lot of the writing that he did before. So we're moving on, and I'm sure you've been looking at the scenery here. I'm just approaching Washington Square Park. And Tristan, just because I'm not looking at the poetry handout, can you tell me what number 9 is? Oh, sorry, Justin. I think I
Tristan can go ahead and do it too if you'd like. So number.
I was like, I don't know where that's at.
Tristan has become kind of like a co-host.
Yes, thank you, Tristan. Anytime, come on down. So do you mean what the poem is? The first line?
No, the stop of
Oh, it's
9.
Washington Square Park. So number 9 is Washington Square Park.
Well, excellent, because here I am, right, in the
Perfect.
northwest corner, and I'm looking at the famous Hangman's Elm. There's a lot of legends about this very huge tree, supposedly 300 years old, maybe one of the oldest trees in Manhattan. And they call it the Hangman's Elm because Washington Square Park, like all the parks in New York, has a layered history. So this was, and I actually learned this from my students, this was for a time a place where free blacks could acquire land. So parts of this property that Washington Square Park now is was owned by free blacks and then taken away from them and integrated into larger white farms. Then later this became a potter's field, meaning that there were, I think they recovered 20,000 bodies of paupers and yellow fever and cholera victims that were buried underneath the ground. It's a very volatile park because Minetta Brook runs underneath it. You might remember that Minetta Lane is just off to my southwest here. And the Minetta Tavern, of course, down there as well. That's named after that brook. And it was a parade grounds for a while, especially during the Civil War, and is now this absolutely wonderful community, right? I teach at NYU, so for my students, this is their campus. It's surrounded by very expensive housing, but the park itself has always been a place of community and interaction and activism. And I think the literary figure I think of most, Walt certainly walked here. We know that he attended a few lectures at NYU for a while, but I think more about Allen Ginsberg, who actually led protests in corners of this park. And Allen Ginsberg, the Beat Generation poet, was the 20th century incarnation of Walt Whitman. He wrote Howl, his most famous poem, in 1955 to respond to and update Whitman's barbaric yawp that he sounds in Song of Myself in 1855. So, oh my goodness, we've got some piano, my friends. So I'm wondering, as we walk through this beautiful green space, if someone would indulge us with Live Oak with Moss 9.
Yes, we have a willing volunteer. Hadley, go ahead. You can unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Yes.
I dreamed in a dream of a city where all the men were like brothers. Oh, I saw them tenderly love each other. I often saw them in numbers, walking hand in hand. I dreamed that was the city of robust friends. Nothing was greater there than the quality of manly love. It led the rest. It was seen every hour in the actions of the men of that city and in all their looks and words.
It's just a shorter poem. It's so beautifully read, Hadley. Thank you so much. Any words that you have about this piece?
I was just kind of thinking about it in modern context, where he's like dreaming of a future city where people can kind of come together and express their love, as because also kind of he thinks about like friendship as love in a way. So it just makes me think of kind of like the pride parades where everybody's just coming together in both friendship and love. And he didn't really get to experience that, but that's of course what today is all about. So that's just kind of how I think about it.
I couldn't have answered better myself, Hadley. Thank you so much. He's envisioning a community, right? And I think Patti Smith read this poem, the alternate rock star Patti Smith of Horses and everything. She's a huge Whitmaniac. She read this poem last year at one of the gatherings for Whitman's 200th birthday. And she read it in Philadelphia. And a lot of people kind of understand the city of friends to be Philadelphia, but I think Whitman was not necessarily thinking of Philadelphia, right? He was thinking of any city, maybe specifically this one, his city, but any city to have this sense of community and bonding. I mean, just pause for a moment and think about how forward thinking that was at that time. The word was not yet invented of the state that he was describing, and yet he's really anticipating a movement. So thank you so much, Hadley. Beautiful, beautiful reading. And I'm sad that the fountain is not on, everybody. Normally this looks pretty amazing here, but actually it looks pretty amazing now. There's a display in there, and it looks like a kind of a, perhaps a sort of a form of protest. I'm not sure what it symbolizes, but if somebody is quick enough to look it up while I'm still on camera, I'm really happy to talk about it. Something about tools of our faith. And the young man sitting in there is facing the Washington Square Arch, built in 1892 by Stamford White, right, commemorating George Washington. And I was talking to my students the other day about all these Washington commemorations and memorials, right? Some of them are beginning to tumble down. And on the other side of the arch, we're looking right up Fifth Avenue here. You have two statues of George Washington put up in 1960. Lots of people associate the arch with a much earlier time, but they depict Washington as statesman and soldier, I think. Look at this. This is wonderful here. It's the type of thing that Walt would have loved, the community that you see in a green space like Washington Square Park. And another reason to think about this park with Whitman is that he founded New York City's first official park, Fort Greene Park, in Brooklyn. He wrote daily editorials in 1846 and 47 to establish a quote unquote lung for Brooklyn. Brooklyn was rapidly developing and Whitman saw the need for green space. And as you see here, so do we. It's not just about getting some air, it's about community and activism. Love thy neighbor, right? New Yorkers are great at that. So as I walk east through the park, I'm wondering if somebody could take a look on my guide sheet. I think the next stop is Matthew Brady's daguerreotype gallery. Am I right, Justin?
You are right.
And I put in, as you guys can see, some sites that Whitman definitely saw and that we can't see anymore, like the daguerreotype gallery and Vauxhall Gardens. And then there are other sites that we can see that he didn't see, but I think he would have really loved going to, for instance, Stonewall. And Brady's daguerreotype studio, unfortunately, you guys cannot see, but I've asked Justin to show you an image of that. Justin, do you mind putting that up there?
Sure thing.
So Matthew Brady is a name almost as famous as Walt Whitman's in the 19th century. There we go. And you're looking at his fourth National Gallery. And that was located at 10th and Broadway, which is not too far from where I'm walking, right? I'm walking into the southeast corner of Washington Square Park. The daguerreotype gallery, this one was huge and kind of catty corner from Grace Church, if you're imagining Broadway on your own. And as you can see here, it was an event to go. So I like to think about Whitman, who loved to cruise up and down Broadway, right, as a flaneur, check out all the nice looking young men. And then if he goes to the daguerreotype gallery, he can see them and really eyeball them without getting into any trouble. Right? The gallery was full of images of both famous and not so famous people. And Whitman enjoyed it all, was photographed by Matthew Brady many times. Some of the most beautiful photographs of Whitman are Brady's. Whitman was the most photographed American poet of the 19th century. And if you go to the Whitman archive online, they have all, I think it's 132 photographs that were taken of Whitman that are extant anyway during his lifetime. So Justin, I think you can take that off there and we can enjoy the walk down to Pfaff's. And if somebody would like to read, are we up to 9?
We are at 10.
10, yes, almost there.
Any volunteers for 10? 10 is 3 lines. All right. Go. I'm afraid I might mispronounce your name. Vaishnava? Navy?
That's Vaishnavi.
Vaishnavi.
Hey, Vaishnavi.
I'm sorry about that, but I'm awful at pronunciations. Thank you for volunteering.
Also, Karbiener.
Cool.
Yeah, and isn't it funny that I'm right now where I am?
Honestly, I just feel really homesick right now because I see all these buildings and I'm like, oh, I wish I was going to class right now. I wish I was walking down the 4th Street.
Vaishnavi is one of my best students at NYU. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for volunteering to read.
Thank you. O you, whom I often and silently come where you are, that I may be with you, as I walk by your side, or sit near, or remain in the same room with you. Little you know the subtle electric fire that for your sake is playing within me.
Okay, another one short and sweet. Whitman had a lot of shorter ones at the end there. Vaishnavi, any feelings about this one?
Well, when I read this, I understand that Whitman doesn't just talk about a physical connection. He's mostly talking about a soulful connection that people feel with each other, whether it's friendship or a relationship. It's just meant to be so much deeper than a physical connection. It means so much more than that. It reminds me of Rumi in a way.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised if Whitman read Rumi, actually. I think that they have a really deep spiritual connection. And I like what you're saying about the deep felt feeling of passion here. Whitman has poems in Live Oak with Moss about all sorts of different types of love. And this one is really about a secret love, right? So he's sitting next to someone. I kind of imagine him at Pfaff's or some bar. And that line, right? Little you know the subtle electric fire burning within me. I think all of us can relate to that, right? Like there's always a time in one's life where perhaps you feel those longing, burning passion for someone, but you cannot speak it for one reason or another. So Whitman voicing this in this tiny little poem, I don't know, it always gives me a spark, especially if someone like Vaishnavi is reading it and bringing it to life. Thank you so much for that. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
So guys, I am walking down 4th Street. I'm in the heart of NYU here. I'm at actually at Mercer and 4th. And I really am very regretful here at this corner, maybe some of you are too, to see that Dojo's has gone out of business. That was a standard eatery for me in my NYU days. But I think we're gonna see a lot of changes in the city, right? Because of Corona and other reasons. But there's still such energy and passion in the city. I am so excited to be walking down here. I haven't been down here in 3 months since classes were canceled in March. And it is refreshing to be on my old stomping grounds and also walking Whitman's path. So on our sheet, in the, I guess we're up to 11, that's the entry for a place called the Vauxhall Gardens. That's another site that you cannot see. And Justin, I think you have a couple of images that you can put up front for everyone.
I do, coming up.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Oh, there you go.
So there we go. We've got 2 images that relate to Vauxhall Gardens. So Central Park was put up pretty late in the city's history, right? 1856, 57 is really when it's getting done. But that didn't mean the city didn't have its green spots. So we just walked through Washington Square Park, which is actually a really substantial size park for a city park. And beyond that, right here, where you see Spectrum, and oh, you don't see it, sorry, you see the screen. But I'm at Broadway and 4th Street. Right to the east of me, until 1859, was a pretty spectacular private garden called the Vauxhall Pleasure Garden. You see an image of it here. And basically it was this green space you had to pay to enter. So Walt was always short on change, right? So I'm not sure how often he actually went, but it was a great place because they had music in one corner, they had a performance of something else like a play in the other, there was a cafe, and just lovely little walking trails. If you go to the next slide, Justin, folks can see, I know this is really tiny, but maybe after the tour is over, you can go back and look at this. This is a broadside for entertainment at the Vauxhall Gardens from, I think, 1846. And on this list, you probably can't see it, but there are lists of like the shows. There's also a word about ice cream that's there. Just really a great place. And so I imagine Walt walking down Broadway, and maybe Justin, you can bring me back into the picture, because I don't actually have this on our tour, but I'm right in front of Evolution. You guys remember this store? This store was down in Soho for years, and then they moved up to my neck of the woods here where my office is. And I always imagine Walt loving a shop like this, right? A natural history museum where you can actually purchase things. So here is another stop for us as we meander down Broadway that may bring Whitman and his New York to life. Oh my goodness, so many goodies in here. No time to go in right now, but it will come, right? So poem number 11 to commemorate the Vauxhall Gardens. Is there a volunteer who would like to read that, please?
Takers for 11, raise your hand or you can chat me, either way. No problem. Or you could just unmute yourself and go for it.
Any volunteer? This is a really good poem, actually. I'm gonna I'm gonna push for this one because it's kind of like about an earthquake of love. So anybody who's feeling that earthquake or who has felt that earthquake, please volunteer.
I have felt that earthquake. I'll read it, Karen.
All right, Justin. Woohoo!
Actually, when I read this, I was like, yes, I know how this feels. All right,
Great.
here we go. Earth, my likeness. Though you look so impassive, ample and spheric there, I now suspect that is not all. I now suspect that there is something terrible in you, ready to break forth. For an athlete loves me, and I him. But toward him, there is something fierce and terrible in me. I dare not tell it in words, not even in these songs.
All right, beautifully read, Justin. And can I ask for your take on that?
Well, I mean, my initial reaction is this absolutely beautiful man, most likely, obviously, physically beautiful man, has just sort of taken over in Walt's mind, more so than even the earth. You know, the earth doesn't matter. There's such a drive, I'm going to say sexual drive in him towards this man that it almost makes him uncomfortable because he won't even write about it here.
Yeah, that's such a great reading of it. And I love that you read into that word athlete to see the physicality of the relationship. This is the other end, Vaishnavi, of what you were talking about with this subtle electric fire. This is just pure animal lust, right?
Right.
Like he has pure sexual passion for this quote unquote athlete. Now, Whitman actually did have a hankering for physically fit men, and some of you may know that he actually wrote a self-help manual called Manly Health and Training. It's kind of hilarious. It's sort of like a 19th century keto diet, but there's some good advice in there. It's not bad. But in this poem, that raw nature, right? He's kind of comparing himself to Earth and the rumblings of Earth, because there's something so quote unquote fierce and terrible in him. So that's what I really love about Live Oak with Moss. You get the range, the gamut, right? You get emotional, spiritual love, but you also get this raw animal passion. And speaking of raw animal passion, I have actually made it. I wasn't sure that my charge would last this long. I'm gonna cross the street, but I'm at the site of Pfaff's cellar, which normally I would take you into, but with everything going on, we're just going to enjoy an outside view, and I've got some really great images to show you as well. And then, Justin, do we have time to take some questions after that?
I mean, as long as you're still with us, we're happy to take questions. I think
I'll have to,
your battery's been a superstar. So.
Okay, right. Like I haven't looked. I don't dare look just yet. I want to show you first the twin tenement from the 1850s, a remarkable survivor, right? This building is over 150 years old. And originally, during Whitman's day, when it was first built, on that parlor level, right, the ground level, you had a very fancy hotel reception area, the hotel, of course, above, called the Coleman House Hotel. But underneath the ground, you had the first bohemian bar in America, brought over by someone named Henry Clapp, who had gone over to the Quartier Latin in Paris and been really impressed with what he saw there, and the communitas and the artists and the writers and the actors all getting together. And he wanted to create something like that in New York, his home city. So when he got back home, he started frequenting, you see Hans Deli there? I know it doesn't look really glamorous, but underneath Hans Deli, and also underneath the next space, the retail space for lease, he started a real kind of like collective that would go to Pfaff's. And the remarkable thing is that Pfaff's was not just like elitist intellectual people getting together and talking about high ideals. There were also stage drivers, just like hardworking people that were going there. There were women there. There were women who brought their illegitimate children. Charles Pfaff, the guy who ran it, was a very open-minded chap, and he just let everybody in. So, I'm getting a notice for low battery.
Okay.
So So I won't have that much to go. And actually that's a good reason, Justin, to call forth the images that I gave you of Pfaff, just to bring people inside.
Okay. Oh, sorry, there you go.
So I love this image. This is by my dear friend Nick Buffin, who is an incredibly talented visual artist, and last year had a one-man show at Poet's House called Gay New York, New Walt Whitman to the Present. And for that show, he did 2 pieces on Pfaff. They were the result of Nick and Paulo Javier, the poet laureate of Queens, and I doing a tour of this neighborhood and then going down into Pfaff. So as you can see here, he's vividly depicting the site of Pfaff. And the only way that you really would know that is you look on the car door, right? And you see Charles Pfaff's name on that door. I really love Nick's detail-oriented artwork. If you want to look him up, the last name again is Buffon. Remarkably talented young visual artist. I love the guy on the bike on the right? Just like adding that pizzazz of color there. Can you show the next slide, please, Justin? And so this is actually Nick the artist with the Leaves of Grass shirt. He's a huge Whitmaniac, as we call them. And that's supposed to be me. And that's the other person supposed to be Paulo, eyeballing the remains of what Pfaff now is, right? So it's basically a deli basement and they store stuff there. But if you look closely, even in this drawing, you can see secret passages, you can see the hints of the vaults in the ceiling. One of the reasons that this was such an amazing place is because it was built underneath the sidewalk, which was actually illegal to do. And you probably can tell why, right? People traipsing over the sidewalk in New York City could easily cave in. So, and they often did. Actually, the store next door, the former Ziggy's Shoes, their vault caved in. It was untaxed space, sort of liminal space. And as you guys know, if you live in New York or LA or any of these cities that have subterranean culture, it's the start of an idea of underground life, underground in many senses, right? So I really love Nick's portrayal of what Pfaff is now, but our kind of like, wow, look at maybe the ghosts that still can be felt there. I love taking students down here because you get to see the real dreamers, right? Those are the ones who actually go, yeah, I can feel Walt having sex in the corner over there, which he might have done. Justin, next slide, please. So I decided to give you some period images too. Nick's were made last year, but these are from 1864. And this first one, everybody looks pretty dignified, right? That's Henry Clapp, the founder of the Pfaff Circle crowd on the left, at the presiding, standing up at the table. There's a guy in there that looks remarkably like Edgar Allan Poe. And Poe is kind of, as many of you know, a sort of a, I don't know, a model of bohemian culture and life. So even though Poe had died before Pfaff's Deli opened, Pfaff's cellar opened, Poe was very much part of the thinking of this crowd. Next slide, please, Justin. So now you see what happens when that delicious lager beer gets into the mix. The women are there, right? Like carousing with the guys. Everybody looks a little sordidly inebriated. You see what happened to Henry Clapp, formerly standing on the left-hand side. Even Poe looks pretty out there. This is from Demeret's New York Illustrated News. And I just think it's such a lovely.
We may have lost Karen to her battery. Let's give her a second. Okay, I think Karen's battery may have run out at this point, but obviously everybody really as I'm seeing from the chat, enjoyed the tour. I know her 2 other slides. If she comes back, I'll let her talk about. Oh, yeah, you're there. Hello.
Oh, good. I started moving around because maybe I just hit a.
Oh, I thought your battery clocked out. I was about ready to talk through your other pictures. So I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm here and hopefully we'll be for another few minutes, but if you
Okay.
could put up the next, I
Sure.
think there are 2 slides.
Yep.
And I had to include some slides of my beloved students. And actually, I think in the mix of this one is Brian Selznick, the illustrator of Live Oak with Moss. So this is what it looks like really downstairs at Pfaff's. Again, not much to look at, but it's the spirit of what happened, right? The remarkable writing that went on there, the culture, the openness. It was the home to the first gay men's club in the city, possibly in America, called the Fred Gray Association. Fred Gray was just a patron of the bar, but apparently so much fun that they named the club after him. And years later, when Whitman had moved down to Washington and Virginia to take care of the soldiers, he would write to his friends and ask about how the Fred Gray Association was doing. So this is our modern version of the Fred Gray Association here. One more slide. And there we go. There's actually Walt Whitman in the basement of Pfaff. See, I told you guys that it could be true. And there he is. Actually, that's my friend John Farrell, who is one of the many great Whitman impersonators that are around in the city. So thank you, Justin. Thank you, everybody. We do have one more poem, right?
We do have one more poem. Would you be able to do the honor of reading it? I feel like we want to hear you read one. Are you able to?
You know what? It's actually really hard for me to do
that. It will be hard for you? Okay.
I have to hold the camera and let me see. Maybe I can do it, Justin. Hold on. I'm gonna try to get my act together, which I can do since you guys are not looking at me. All right. I think do it. On screen?
You're good.
Okay, am I actually there?
Yep, you're there. You're here.
Okay, there I am. Okay. All right, guys, one more. That's Live Oak with Moss, number 12. To the young man, many things to absorb, to engraft, to develop. I teach that he be my elect. But if through him rolls not the blood of divine friendship, hot and red, if he be not silently selected by lovers, and do not silently select lovers, of what use were it for him to seek to become a lev of mine? So Whitman is using a French word, which he sometimes did. He was a big fan of France because of the way that France represented democracy. Lafayette was a kind of a model of democracy that Whitman met when he was much younger. And élève means student in French, right? So this poem is about kind of finding
All right, we'll give Karen a second. Maybe she just dropped out for a moment. I will take the opportunity while Karen is trying to reconnect to let everybody know we've got this question a couple of times on the chat. Yes, this, like all of our experiences, will be available in the archives. Oh, there she is. Okay.
Oh, yeah, for some reason, this is spotty here. Anyway, I will take a few questions if people have any.
Sure. If you have questions, so since you guys have the power to unmute yourselves today, if you'd like to raise your hand and unmute, we can hear your voice, or you can ask in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with. I know we usually do chat, but let's do it a little different. If anybody has a question for Karen. While we are getting questions, Karen, thank you for an amazing tour.
Oh, you're welcome. And actually, while I'm here, I'm in search of a quieter area. Just one more thing I'll show all of you.
Sure.
On the on the sidewalk here outside of Pfaff's are remnants of the glass panels that used to be in place, so that the basement, so that the people patronizing the basement bar would actually have light. So there's, even though Pfaff's is not here anymore, there's some sign of Pfaff's. And I'm trying to get myself back on here.
Karen, would you mind showing, could you show that one more time? I had my screen share up.
Oh, sure. I'm going to show one with a blue heart on it so that you can see it very clearly. But people might know these, especially in Soho. There are still some remnants of sometimes glass circles that are set into the sidewalk because of the use of cellar space. But those particular cement, what are they, hexagons? They're covering what used to be glass panels, allowing light to get into Pfaff's cellar. So, sorry, my camera is going nuts. I think it's probably running out of a battery.
You might be running out of juice at that point. But if you could go to audio if you'd like, or if there are any questions, you're getting obviously tons of praise. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the poetry handouts and ability to follow along. That was really great. And thank you everybody who read. This made the experience all the more enjoyable and special.
I have to say thank you too, because they were such beautiful readings. I mean, really an experience. Thank you everybody who participated today.
Yes,
Justin,
yes, sure.
Justin, could I say a little something?
Yes, please do.
My name is Deirdre. I am so pleased to be here, Karen.
Deirdre,
and it was
friends. Deirdre, I'm glad that you're here.
I am here, and I have to say, I am so thrilled. This is my first tour with Karen. I've known Karen since we were 8 or 9 years old. We grew up together, and I will say that I am privy to some of Karen's first writings from when she was very young. And I saved them for a long time and gave them to her at her wedding because they were so fun and inspirational. We grew up on a little island together and swam together, and she wrote and wrote and wrote always, and has always been such an inspiration for the intellectual side and writing. And this tour has been amazing. We no longer live in New York. I'm in the South, in Atlanta, where we have some live oaks, many actually.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. One that recently fell in our backyard during that storm. They are huge trees. They're beautiful. I've learned so much through this tour. It's been amazing. I relived my days in New York. I relived the days of my uncle who was gay, who was born in the 30s and grew up in New York City and always had an apartment in New York City and lived a very open gay life in New York. And I know it was challenging for him in many ways, but also he lived to the fullest. And I just learned so much through this tour. It's been so much fun. Wasn't easy to get here because I had promised my children to meet some friends of theirs at the pool. So I had to get them there and get out of there and bring them home all within 45 minutes, but they complied. So here I am, and I've been able to sit through this. It's been wonderful. I learned so much. Julius's Bar, I've never been to, but my cousin rather, was recently married there. And I wasn't able to attend, but my siblings were there, and I can't wait to get back to New York City. I mean, I come back in the summers, as Karen knows usually, but hoping to get there this summer with my family, and if not, when my eldest son starts college in New York very shortly, hopefully, he'll be there and we'll be there to visit him often. So it's been amazing. I can't wait to participate in another tour and send Aiden in person when he's in college in New York on a tour with you. Thank you.
In person is better. Dear, thank you so much, and much love to your beautiful big family. And I have to give a shout out to Untapped Cities and Michelle Young, the founder of Untapped Cities, and Justin for actually bringing so many people together. My worlds are colliding, right? To have an old students and New York all in one place. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's our pleasure, Karen. We love having you. We do. This was great. So Any other questions or comments for Karen before we sign off, or actually before we
I
should
know
leave
it's
the battery?
in a moment, guys. I see
I
the light.
know. Thank you, Anne. We appreciate you too, Anne. Well, if there are no other questions, again, this will be in the archives in a couple of days after I edit it. I will send it out, so don't worry. Coming up next week, for all of you joining us, on Monday, we have a virtual tour of the Naval Cemetery in Brooklyn, which is going to be really fun. Tuesday, we have a talk, The Seafaring Cats of Gotham, by the author who just wrote the book. Her name is Peggy. I can't remember her last name, but we grew up in the same town, strangely enough. And then Wednesday, we have a virtual talk of the Central Park North Woods.
Roster, yeah.
So, oh, and lastly, for those of you who joined us for Behind the Curtain, as you know, we had a technical problem and had to sign off on that. We will be redoing that event on Thursday. So next week, July 2nd, Ralph will be back to do Behind the Curtain. We're really excited because we really wanted to see it. So thank you again, Karen. Any last words, Karen?
I can't wait to see everybody in person. You know, these are awfully fun to do, but there is nothing like being there. I'm sorry, I'm old-fashioned about that, and I just look forward to seeing everybody and really experiencing the city as we should together. So, but thank you so much, Justin, for letting us do at least this, which is just wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, it was asked if there was a way to support you or tip you. Would you like to direct somebody towards the initiative or to something?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm not even thinking of that, but I'm the president of the Walt Whitman Initiative, and we do a lot of cultural activism. So if you are interested in learning about our various initiatives, we're just about to start off our own Robust American Love speaker series. And we've got lots of other things going. Just visit our website, waltwhitmaninitiative.org. So thank you, Justin, for letting me put that.
Oh, yeah, no, and that was Marcy. Marcy wanted to know how to tip you. Marcy also
Oh,
gave you a huge compliment. She wants to be your student. And Marcy's one of our top insiders, one of the first. There was a question I want to clarify about the Behind the Curtain. If you registered, apparently you can use the same link, but I will send out the re-registration again anyway. Janet, thank you for letting me know about Federal Hall, that they cleaned up the graffiti. Oh, but you could still see it on Washington. Okay. And I thank everybody. Have a very good weekend. Karen, you have an awesome weekend as well. Enjoy your summer. Hopefully we will see you again. I think there's another Whitman tour we have in the works possibly. So
yeah, yes.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good day, guys. Have a good weekend. Be safe.
Okay.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.